Every dog has its day. When I was 13, I was routinely bullied on the train on the way home from high school. I was a bit nerdy with thick glasses and very shy and socially awkward. This girl was from another more affluent school that used the same train. She was mean, cruel and humiliating, and I dreaded the trip. I of course will never forget her. Fast forward 20 years. I am now a veterinarian and look quite different. One day I have a consult with my old bully and her dog. I instantly recognized her. She has no clue who I am. Let me stress, I would never harm an animal or cause any suffering because of my feelings towards an owner. Ever, but her dog did end up requiring shampoos, admission to a weight monitoring program, regular weight checkups, regular dental checkups, dietary supplements, etc., perhaps a bit more frequently than necessary. It can be expensive to be a bully. Do you have a secret little subreddit that is a favorite? Share it in the comments and it could become the next big thing. Crouching cheater, hidden revenge. I found out my fiancé was cheating on me when I was 8 months pregnant. A bit of a hard blow. Now for context, this guy was a wealthy guy and he liked nice things. He had a lot of expensive high-end clothing. Now I am not a revenge type person and I don't like conflict, or repercussions, and I was in a pretty vulnerable position. So after I asked him to leave, I went and got all of his suit trousers and carefully loosened / picked the stitches around the crotch, seat area. This was not really noticeable. However, any bending or crouching, they would have split wide open. I never got to see or even hear about this, but I know it must have happened. It was a slight source of comfort. Another post reminds me of my own teacher, student petty revenge moment. Years ago I taught very specific skills training at a local vocational college. It was rare for the school to actually fail anyone, even with terrible attendance, failing tests, incompetence. Yeah, frustrating for instructors and for students who actually tried and did well. Most students were amazing and I really miss that aspect of the job, and even keep in touch with some of them professionally. Classes were 12 to 40 students. If above 24 or so, I would have a co-teacher. In every group there was often 1 or 2, maybe 3, bad apples. In this class of 26, there were 2, let's call them A and B. They had terrible attendance, failed tests, were generally incompetent, but knew the school would pass them, and sure enough they did both get their diploma. Several years later I was at a job site, and in walks B with a resume. B sees me talking with owner and manager. Can I just say that I had a really hard time not busting into laughter at the look on B's face? I was however professional and courteous as B handed over the resume and left. After which the manager turns to me and asks if B was a former student of mine. To which I replied with, yes they were. Dead serious face. Manager says, so, what do you? Then just sees my face, and says, oh, I see, thank you. Resume goes directly into shredder. We all move on with our meeting. Later that evening at home I'll admit I did a little happy dance. Rah rah Rasputin. My mum has a very Eastern European name and my paternal grandmother hated that her baby boy married someone with such a weird name. It's clearly not an English name but is well known in English-speaking countries, like Helga. When my parents announced they were having a baby, my grandma's first comment was, you better not give it one of those weird European names, so naturally, my parents started referring to me as Rasputin and kept their name choices secret. Mum and Dad also kept my gender secret, which drove Grandma insane and made her hellish to deal with on top of the name thing. My parents were done with this BS by the time I came along and wanted some revenge. My maternal grandma, who was Ukrainian, had made me a baby hat with traditional Ukrainian embroidery. When I was born, my parents let the nurses in on their revenge plan and asked them to swaddle me in a blue blanket instead of a pink or white one and put that hat on me for when my paternal grandparents came to the hospital to meet me. Grandma walks in, sees my hat, and then my mum says, meet your grandson, Rasputin. We got attached to the name during the pregnancy. Grandma was not impressed. Every photo of her she has the most impressive cat butt face. My parents and the nurses kept up this ruse for 2 hours, the nurses going so far as to ask, how's little Razzie doing, when they'd come into the room. After a while, Mum couldn't keep it going anymore, and while my grandpa was holding me next to Mum's bed, she told him I'm actually a girl and my real, very, normal, name. He was a prankster, especially when it annoyed his wife, so she knew he'd appreciate the joke. Until he passed away, my grandpa's nickname for me was Razzie, much to my grandma's annoyance. Burger King manager story. Many moons ago, I worked at Burger King as an hourly manager while in college. I liked the job. I could do 3 or 4 shifts per week when I was in school, and it was really easy to be full-time when school was out, as I would cover vacations for both my store and other, nearby stores. At one point, the store manager, SM, changed and the new guy was a piece of work. He had been a manager with Burger King for about 20 years. After he had been at the store for a week, I saw why he never got promoted. He did no work, nobody liked him, he complained about everyone, he would give staff a hard time, and, most amazingly, he had this way of disrupting the service line that made everyone tell him they had it under control and he should go back to his office. I used to volunteer to close on holidays and stuff. I mean, I was a college student and wanted the hours. Also, this was the 80s, so closing time on days like Nye and Xmas Eve was 8 p.m. or earlier when it was really slow. Closing night included a bit more work as we had to do a full inventory and significant paperwork. The first time I did this, I worked with the old SM and she was great. We both worked hard and we were done in 90 minutes flat. She also showed me how to do the paperwork. I had done the next 2 NYE's closes by myself, including the paperwork. The year after that, when SM had been at the store for like 4 months, SM decided he was going to close Nye with me. I was pissed as I was wanted to be at a friend's Nye party by 11:30 p.m. and I knew he would make it take forever. That shouldn't have been an issue, but this guy was a greater schmuck. I am pretty sure he worked this shift on purpose because he knew I would do all the work and he could just sit on his butt and take all the credit. I did speak with him a little bit during the shift, telling him about the party he wanted to go to. He shared that he told his wife he would be home by midnight so they could welcome the new year together. Since there were 2 of us, he didn't schedule an extra staff member. As I expected, he sat on his tukas all shift, so inventory didn't start until we closed. We finished that up about 11 p.m. and start on the paperwork. He insists he has to do it. When I ask to leave, he tells me I have to stay so I can watch him do the paperwork. I asked why, but he was just being an butt, so I stayed. He was the slowest person with the paperwork I had ever seen. It's now 11:30 and he is barely halfway through. I want to get to my friend's party before midnight, so I ask if I can finish the paperwork at home, sharing that I will bring it to my shift tomorrow night. Since the paperwork isn't collected right away, the delay shouldn't be an issue. He agrees, and I grab all the paperwork and punch out and head home. I do the paperwork and, as promised, bring it into my next shift. Later that week, I'm working when the DM is there. I had a great relationship with him. He loved that I would help cover at other stores, even last minute when I could. I ask him how to report the time I worked at home on the year-end paperwork. He gives me the strangest look and just says something like, huh? So I tell him the story of our close that night. He was pissed. 2 days later, I come in for my shift and am told that we will be getting a new store manager next week. The old one was fired. I did a little dance, which was fine since the assistant manager who told me the news was smiling. I talked to the DM later about what happened. He said that the SM was on probation for all of the problems that were happening at the store, including many that happened prior to him transferring to this store. My story was just the last straw. It was then that I realized I got my revenge, even though I hadn't realized I was doing so until it was too late. Share your story in the comments. I would love to add them to a video.